Jason, can you hear me?
Yes, Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy.
Good, good.
And,
I like John's picture there.
yeah, we got a nice picture of
Oh,
John.
I
There he
want
is.
the kitty picture back.
Yeah, that was my son about 10 years ago after chocolate ice cream in Maine. And a picture because it's like pure happiness and silliness.
I love it. Yeah.
John, I like your backdrop there, buddy.
Thanks.
That's pretty original. I like it. So, hey, I was just on the phone with Russell. He said he'll hop on at five till. But I had mentioned to him that I wanted you guys to kind of mention that you'd talked about this and that you're offering a dinner at Russell's together. It's a benefit. And Russell said, I'll pimp it as long as you want. But I have to set kind of the baseline. I know the baseline is like $5,000 for it.
Sounds great. Oh, that's wonderful. That's very generous of you guys to be able to do that.
Oh, we'll have fun.
Yeah.
Come on. Ultimately, you know, we're paid to make wine and laugh, and that's not too hard of a life.
Yeah, really. How hard can it be, huh?
I see the Beckstoffer
These are all weird and different.
background, John.
Pharrell. These are two. That's Argentinian. No. Sure,
I think, you know, Jean, on your controls, can you mute people or no?
I don't have a clue. Let me check.
If not, what we could do is we could just ask people to mute themselves until they have unless they have a question.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think it's easier that way. Because I'm not sure if I can mute everybody here.
I think you can, but
You
I don't
know.
have your, see, I don't have your level of Zoom.
Control.
I'm gonna get it, but I think if you go to participants, yeah, actually, you know, if you tap on participants, John,
All right.
it gives you control there.
okay, so my meeting just went away. Let me see.
You're still here.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, if I hit participants, all I have is an invite. So let me see. Oh yeah, I can do it. Got it.
Yeah, you see everybody. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I'm gonna
we want
mute.
people to speak up for sure. I just
Yeah, I for sure want to mute Chris because nobody wants to.
yeah. You want to mute me? Yes.
Participants.
Of course you do.
And most importantly, I'm gonna want to mute Russell.
Clearly having a good time.
Yeah, come
there
to
you
think
go.
of it. So people are showing up. This is good.
Yeah, I see there.
I think it's going to be a full house tonight, John.
Full house is good. I like full
Yeah.
houses.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have hopefully fun because
That's ready. Let me know. So
Well,
we all need some fun these days.
Yeah. I think it's getting a little more fun. So, hey, Tahoe's got about 3.5, 4 feet of snow now.
Yeah, but they were supposed to have 10 and they only have 4.
Well, I'll take 4. It's 4
Yeah, me
more
too.
than we had.
Yeah.
How's Napa? You guys been getting some good rain?
Less than we anticipated. But it's actually good because you really want to have spread rains instead of big events, right? So
Yeah.
you want to be able to have, it's better to have 10 days at a half an inch a day than 10 inches at once, and so it's better that way.
Yeah, definitely absorbs it better. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we need it down here, Mill Valley with the redwoods. We really
Yeah,
need
for
more
sure.
rain.
Paul, how do I get the sound to go through here?
we'd like to thank everybody as you're joining us. If you would, you could put your microphone on mute in the bottom left-hand corner until you have a question, or if you'd like to speak up, just to keep some of the background noise down.
It's like every meeting I've ever
Hmm?
been.
It is me.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm on mute.
Every meeting I'm at, could somebody mute their microphone?
We don't want you not to talk. we just, we're probably gonna have a lot of people on the show or on the event tonight. So I'll just try to control it.
Well, it's getting cold here in Florida too. In Orlando, it's getting into the 50s tonight.
That's really chilly.
Hey, look, we have 3 fireplaces on tonight. You probably didn't even know the house had 3 fireplaces in Florida.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it did. It's like special feature in Florida, 3 fireplaces.
Yeah. Well, one's a fire pit, all right, but
the fire pit, that's a requirement, I think.
Yeah, that's a good way of living, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's good living. It's definitely.
So Jason, should I mute Chris now so we don't have to hear him?
He'll need about
Actually,
30 seconds in the beginning, and after that, you're good to go.
The beauty is, John, you can actually turn off my camera. So even
Uh-oh.
better.
No.
How's Bastien doing, John?
Pretty good. I was with him today, and things are good. We're cleaning up shop up there quite a bit. We sold a bunch of 19s and 1817s. Unfortunately, 2020, we don't have any, as you know, better than anybody, since you were there. We don't have much reds, if any. And so we're really focusing on 2021 prepping. We're going to update a bunch of equipment, take off some of these big tanks to put smaller tanks, that are much more in par with high producing capacity and high quality wine. So
yeah, some of those tanks were pretty large over at Maxville.
Yeah. So they were actually made mainly for their. They ship a lot of wine, low price wine to China on bulk projects and stuff like that. So we need it for grapes. So we're gonna remove pretty much 2/3 of this and to make sure that it's appropriate to what we need.
Yeah.
So outside of that, he was good. He went to Hawaii for Christmas, over Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
So and the friend, one of the friend that he was with, sent me a picture of him trying to do a flip on the sand. And fortunately, he didn't have enough velocity. So halfway through the flip, he kind of crashed down on the sand. That was really funny.
Wow. Yeah, we our son and his wife are in Hawaii right now. Yeah. But a lot of requirements to get in there, I'm telling you.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're gonna mute everybody.
Jason, when do you think you're gonna be back in Napa?
Well,
let me send it to you right now.
based on what I just heard about this potential auction item, maybe sooner versus later, with the kids and the boys and their wives and my wife and our daughter and her boyfriend, that equals 8. So might be there sooner versus later.
I like the way you're thinking there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll all put you to work, the 8 of you.
Yeah.
There you go.
You can pay a lot to go work. That sounds really appetizing. I just emailed it. Let's see. I think Russell's coming in now. He was trying to get online here.
You're the woman I love from me. No, I have part of the deal.
No, I didn't. I sent it to you. Hold on for a second. Can you pass it over to him?
We'll get started in a few minutes. We definitely want to thank everybody for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you all for joining this hopefully fun event. You'll see that Russell has a personality as big as Chris's ego. No, just kidding, Chris. But and he's on mute, so he can't really directly answer. So that's good.
I took myself off.
We'll have fun and we'll talk wines and directions and Napa and plenty of stuff and get a good time in and hopefully some good laughters.
Yeah. like you said, it not much can go wrong around with good company and a good glass of wine. And in this case, several good glasses of wine, right?
Well, the more you drink, the more fun it will be, guys. So that afraid to just start drinking early.
Yeah. And I hope, I think we sent out the information about opening your wines in advance. I hope that everyone's already opened up their wine, letting them breathe. And if you haven't, crack them.
Yeah, now's a good time.
Yeah. So. So. All right. And we're filling up pretty well. I think we've probably got another 10 groups or so to go. So we're making good progress here. I think we'll be able to get started, pretty much on time.
Good.
So.
On the East Coast here, and I know we have people spread out all over the country. So 8:30 p.m. over here. So wine time is perfect time.
Yeah, you guys are ready, aren't you? Chomping at the bit.
Right. It's like, wow, we could have been on our second bottle by now.
Well, some might be.
Yeah, in fairness, some of us did start early.
I'm glad to hear that.
Good for you. Good for you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So.
Hi, Rachel.
It's always a challenge, trying to find the right time between California and the East Coast, right? So.
So if you want to hear a funny story, Chris and Jason, while we wait for the rest of people to connect, I consult in Italy, Spain, and stuff like that. And because of the pandemic, I couldn't go there for blendings. So they shipped samples, and I ended up having a blending session at 2 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Working schedule. Russell, you're finally on time.
You're muted, Russell. He doesn't know.
I had 30 seconds to spare.
How are you, buddy?
I am fabulous. It's been a rainy, ugly day, but it's a good thing. I was going to start watering the vineyards next week if we didn't have rain. And it's just crazy thinking about watering vineyards in the middle of January.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have a wet February and March. Let's hope. So,
Yeah, we need it for sure.
yeah. All right.
I don't know when it's appropriate to start saying inappropriate things about one of my favorite winemakers. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to talk about myself, and then I'll really get into John. But
Yeah. Let them drink a little bit, Russell. Let them drink a little bit.
Russell, this is Jason. We haven't met yet. I'm looking forward to it. But I have to tell you, in all fairness, Jean has already gotten a head start on you by talking about you for 10 minutes. So you're a little late, my friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Early snack. Yeah.
I'm willing to admit right off the bat that John's the only man on the planet who I feel comfortable grabbing my bum, and it seems to happen every time we get together at our Big Boys Wine Group, and I don't know how the tradition started, but I know I feel love when all of a sudden I'm rubbed up against assertively by a big man with a beautiful accent.
Oh man! So just so you all know, Russell is as tall and big as me, but his arms as large as my thigh, because he lifts much more weight than I do. So he can defend himself. I think he actually likes it.
Indeed, I do, my friend. Well, when are we going to start drinking first? It's
Yeah.
Chris,
Probably
you kick it off, Chris.
Yeah, it's a good time to kick it off. So welcome everyone. I'm the founder of Proof Loyalty. I'm Chris Barnes. We are the group behind Private Seller. We're really excited to host this event and kind of in participation with UBS here. I'll give you a little background of this. First of all, I'm really excited because Russell and John are two of the top winemakers in Napa, and they're big personalities, as you already have seen. Great people, and it's just going to be a great dialogue and between the two, and a lot of fun. a little background on how this particular event came to be was, this is a benefit for the Napa Valley Community Foundation from the fires from last year. If you were tracking that at all, we had some, once again, I think it's been 4 out of 5 years, we had just catastrophic fires in the valley. And a number of wineries were burned, a number of people were burned out of their homes. And as it turns out, Jason Johnson, who's with us tonight, and who is a financial advisor, a UBS financial advisor, was in the valley at the time and working with Jean, learning about winemaking. And he went back and wrote a letter to upper management at UBS and said, I think that we need to do something to help the community. And from that, we decided to put together this virtual tasting and contributes funds to the Napa Valley Community Foundation. So with that intro, I'd like to give Jason the floor, let him talk a little bit about his experience, and then we'll head over to the winemakers and start drinking some great wines.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you, Chris. And it's my pleasure to join in the introductions and really share my personal experience as to how the tasting was brought together and all the hard work from those who helped put it together. And first, I'd like to thank the UBS Card Services team, especially Chris Munkaski, who heads the rewards and benefits side of the card program. Of course, Chris Barnes with Private Seller, and the winemakers who you'll hear much more from, Jean and Russell. But really like to thank each of you. You're going to get an insider's perspective from 2 of the top winemakers, not only in Napa, but really in the world. And Private Seller, like Chris mentioned, is donating a portion of the proceeds to the Napa Valley Community Foundation. So it all started for me back in August of last year on a wine tasting just like this. And we attended a virtual wine tasting. Jean was the winemaker. We had a wonderful experience that evening, drank some wonderful wine. And Jean happened to put his contact information out there for us. Later that month in August, I reached out to him and told him that we really wanted to learn more about wine. And quite shockingly, he invited us. He says, well, why don't you come to Napa during harvest season, and experience harvesting of the grapes and the winemaking process. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, we'd love to have you out. So in September, we went out to Napa, Maxville Winery, where Jean is the head winemaker and Bastien Lucas is the associate winemaker. And Bastien, his team, really provided hands-on training for us. We helped to receive, process, and sort grapes and tasted from the different vats, and got to stir grapes and punch down red wine barrels. And don't worry, we didn't do it with our bare feet. We had a little process for that. But my wife and I were touched by the friendliness of all those working in the winemaking process and the wineries and the tasting rooms, and really felt that we wanted to give back after all the fires. So after a lot of due diligence, that's where the Napa Valley Community Foundation was the obvious choice, because they do truly give back to the workers who maybe have lost their homes and so forth. And by the way, Private Seller, which Chris Barnes is the founder of, they have relationships with scores of top wineries in Napa and elsewhere. And I've gotten to know Chris quite well. And if you really want an insider experience from top wineries and have access to really limited production wines and wines mostly for club members, get to know Chris. Sort of rat you out, Chris, but let them get your phone number and you'll have that, because you'll be in an elite group with early access to special events and then really get an insider experience when you're in Napa and get to go visit the wineries through Chris being able to make those connections. But with that, I'll just turn it back over and say thank you very much and look forward to the introductions of the world-class winemakers we have in front of us.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks. And Russell and Jean, give your stories. May the party begin.
And the party begin. We have lots of parties to do. That's for sure. Well, thanks UBS, thanks Jason, thanks Chris for all your efforts, your help. Jason, it was a pleasure not only meeting you, but to put you into real hard labor and to put you as a wine industry slave during harvest is always fun. And there's no doubt about that. What can I say, ladies and gentlemen? I think that I'm going to start with my personal experience and my personal intro, and then I'll transfer it to Russell. But at any given point, Russell is going to interrupt me because that's who he is. He always interrupts me. Trust me, it's not the first time. When we talk to press, he interrupts me. When we talk to fellow winemakers, he interrupts me because he's just that much smarter and prettier than I am. So we'll be okay, and I'll interrupt him back. But I was born and raised in Switzerland, believe it or not, funny enough, in Lausanne, Switzerland. If you had to kind of have one word for me, it would be failure, really, because like every male in my family, I decided to go to law school. And in law school, I decided to play cards and drink wine. And so after 2 years of law school and understanding that law school was really not my thing as much, I decided then to go and do wealth management, of course, in Switzerland. Why not, right? UBS, Swiss banks, etc. So I went into wealth management, and the same theme started coming in the interaction of wine. And so I said, okay, even though I only have 2 brain cells, the wine theme seems to come back. So let's go knock on the only door I know. My godfather, who had the winery that's been in his family on the Lake of Geneva since 1536. And I'm like, can I try to work because I'm a failure and I need to know what I'm going to do? It's like, yeah, sure. Meet the winemaker on Monday. So I meet the winemaker on Monday morning at 7, and he looks at me and says, what do you want to do? I'm like, you're the winemaker. And he's like, okay, let's go taste wine. We tasted 62 different wines. Ladies and gentlemen, at the time, I didn't know you were supposed to spit. I got so drunk and happy that I went home with my arms raised up in the air saying, I found my calling. Obviously, now I learned to spit because my liver would die because I tasted 50 wines per day. And that's how I kind of started in the wine industry. And the funny story before I give it back to Russell is, believe it or not, you all are UBS card clients. Well, I had the chance and pleasure about 4 or 5 years ago to be hired by actually Annie Leibovitz to be on the UBS commercial worldwide for UBS banking. So Annie Leibovitz was taking the pictures. UBS hired me as the face, not because of the prettiness, obviously, because probably of the Swiss heritage, or God only knows what. So that was my story about the Swiss heritage and the banking. So Russell, since I know you're really smart and way more talented than I am, how did you fall in love with wine?
I knew that I had issues with alcohol when I was 13. I transferred, my parents moved from California, I'm 5th generation Sonoma County, to Spokane, Washington for my senior year of high school. And I went up there and I knew I was going to be a star football quarterback. And I transferred to a school where there was a quarterback named Mark Rippon. So all of a sudden I went to being a tight end and knowing I was not going to go to college for football. So I started hosting the keg parties on Fridays and Saturdays. And I would sell tickets before homeroom Thursdays and Fridays. And I would build in enough big so I could drink a great bottle of wine. And I remember my senior year, last week, I was drinking 74 Heights Martha's Vineyard out of a red Solo cup while pumping a keg of PBR while a sophomore was throwing up all over my shoes, thinking, oh my God, if I spill this wine, my weekend is ruined. I loved wine from an early age on. And when I was in grad school studying philosophy at Gonzaga University, I worked for Gallo, and the Gallo family gave me a scholarship to continue my studies. And my whole life, I have loved wine. I got out of grad school. I wrote a syndicated wine column through the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and it gave me access to great winemakers. And when I retired from my corporate job, I moved back to California, and Callan-Dorothy Shokit gave me a ton of grapes. And I got 15 friends together, and we removed every grape by hand. And I told everybody, look, we're going to have this great party. I'm going to bring 2 cases of wine. It'll take a couple hours. Well, 14 hours later, when we finally finished, we had 1 bin with plump grapes, 1 with slightly dimpled grapes, and 1 with dehydrated grapes. And 2 days later, tasting that juice, it was amazing that they came from the same varietal, let alone the same vineyard. And I was hooked. And since that day, my life has never been the same. Like John, I work with a lot of different vineyards and properties. Last year, I worked with 174 different vineyard blocks. We are some of the luckiest people in the world. We're paid to hike beautiful vineyards. We're paid to make something that makes the world a better place. And I never, ever for once forget how absolutely blessed I am. Other than making wine, the only thing that's ever come close to giving me this kind of pleasure as well, married my wife. So I know how truly blessed and fortunate I am. So please, let's drink some wine. So
Guys,
John,
I have to
Crack
say,
the wine.
because I was born and raised, neutral and diplomatic in Switzerland. I mean, he really wants to say is we're glorified drivers, because all we do is during harvest, especially, is drive from one site to the other to taste grapes, to taste wine. I mean, that's really, I love your poetry, Russell, but I mean, I'm going to have to call you when you're not saying the truth. And Russell drives that big truck during harvest, and he drives like a wacko, and most of the time you know where he is. So that's all right. I mean, Russell, no worries. I got you back.
I love you for it. So which one of your three wines do we want to start with, John?
Well, actually, let's start. I think let's start with Artelade. That's a good site. And guys, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a background with the brand, because Russell will do with adversity the same. The debate started because, as some of you might know, I started Alpha Omega back in 2006. And I met a guy who's a fellow partners of Alpha Omega, who used to own a small restaurant chain called Taco Bell, and sold that Taco Bell to PepsiCo. And we actually ended up quite often at a dinner table talking about sports and religion and sex and politics and every possible subject on the face of the planet. And we realized at that time that nothing was more important than the human interaction in front of a great meal and a great bottle of wine. And we said, society today has a tendency through these wonderful little machines called cell phones, computers, instant messages, WhatsApp, etc., to take us to a faster pace. And we wanted to create a wine that really represents for us what we believe in, human interaction. And we fell in love with the fact that wine has a tendency of stopping time, of showing to people that you enjoy the person you're with and the bottle of wine you drink. And the entire debate concept started of that, because let's be honest, Russell had many 100 points in his career. The debate had a bunch of 100 points. Never Blind was the 100 points my favorite wine. But I can tell you one thing, I always remember that where I was and who I was with. And the same bottle of wine drank with your worst enemy or your lover is going to taste dramatically different. And therefore, I think it's really important to know that people, or the drinker, is actually ultimately the only judge of a wine. Nobody else but the person drinking them should judge a wine. And so we wanted, with the concept of creating three wines. We have a Cabernet Sauvignon 3-pack, and we have a Cabernet Franc 3-pack of three different sites made by the same guy, your humble servant, in the same way. And then we wanted to leave and let people judge them, enjoy them, because I ultimately don't believe anymore in great wines. I only believe in great bottles, because it's so dependent of who you drink it with and when you drink it. And so today we have three different Cabernet Sauvignon sites, obviously Artelade, Sacre Denali. And
John, I apologize for interrupting. To me, something big that's in that equation, and I don't know how you feel about it, we've never discussed this, and we're drinking the debate. Does the biodynamic calendar ever have any impact on you and what you open and how you think the wine gets? Like, today's a leaf day. I normally only pour wines for critics and special guests on fruit and flower days. I'm a big believer in barometric pressure and the effects of the biodynamic calendar, much like they are at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti and Loire and so many of the great European wineries. Does that have any impact on your thoughts and how you think wines show?
Honestly, I do agree with you. I think that it does have an influence, and I have a bunch of apps that help me, figure out what day we're on, and what obviously what's a flower day, and all of that. The problem, as you know, my friend, is you're sometimes forced to do things that you can't because of time, because of business, driven decisions. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and I work with some properties that are 100% biodynamic in the world, but very few compared to the total, I'm sure, just like you. And I think that I tend to pay attention for the drinking, but it's hard because you have so many obligation often to kind of go around it. I'm forced to go around it too many times to really follow it by the rule.
I love how this first wine, I don't know why, but for the last month, I've been looking at every wine I drink kind of like a teeter-totter, because we've just bottled our adversities and they're so young. I love how this wine has front of the palate weight, that there's a skin tannin to it, not a seed tannin, that's pushing the weight towards the front of my tongue. And this wine's incredibly persistent. I love that richness and that unctuousness. There's almost a saline savory quality to this. It's just delicious.
Thanks a lot. Artelade is actually Pritchard Hill. It's a Montagna vineyard on Pritchard Hill, which is a fairly elevated, a little bit cooler site, and a slower ripening site than I originally estimated to be very nice when I got to know. Because Russell, I think you agree with me that vineyards are like humans. We go through a phase of the honeymoon, of getting to know one another, and it takes a long time to explore a site and truly know how the site reacts to conditions, right? And especially to heat in Napa Valley, to rain, to colder years, to warmer years, and all of that, ladies and gentlemen, ultimately affects that difference that you have between vintages. Because most brands, that the bigger a brand is, the more they try to go to a house taste, to raise these vintage variation. But we small producers like Russell or the debates, tend to express and maximize vintage difference. And I think you're right, Russell, in that Artelade, what I try to do in all the wines, the three wines that you'll see, and I think Artelade is a little bit more volcanic soil. It has the influence of Lake Hennessy. It's a little bit elevated. So you have a longer, and Pritchard Hill as well as me, my friend, you have that really longer ripening pattern that takes time to extract a little bit more. I tend to go with winemaking to try to widen drinkability of a wine, because I really started working on tannin polymerization, and obviously in 2001 started with barrel fermentation. And ladies and gentlemen, what it is, when I went from Lynchbach to Newton, I read that 95% of wine are consumed within 48 hours of their purchase. So I said, I'm a drinking freak for older wines. Just like one of the greatest older wine of Napa is the wine that Russell was drinking in a solo cup, 74 Heights Martha's. I'm from 73. The only good region for wine is 73. And I love these older wines. But as a winemaker, I wanted to produce wine that you can drink at age 0 or 20 years down the line, not based on my taste, but ultimately based on the mood you're in. Because I think ultimately wine is a mood. You're in a mood for a bigger, stronger wine. You're in a mood for a little bit more elegance and refinement. And that's what I tried doing with getting these barrel fermentation, is softening these tannin structure, polymerizing, right? Making the tannins stick to one another so there's not as angular on your palate, as soft and round. To finish on that particular wine, think about a wine that way. The backbone of a wine should always be acidity and the skeleton tannins. So the bigger it is, the more you need acidity and tannins to hold the wine together. Just like Russell, with his big muscle and his big personality, if he had a really weak spine, well, he would fall down like a blob. Wine is exactly the same. You need to hold the wines together.
If people can, and I don't know how many stems everybody has, but as we're drinking his wine from Pritchard Hill, my Melanson vineyard, which has the blue label, is also from Pritchard Hill. And in an absolute opposite of what Jean has done, Heidi and I bottled these wines literally 4 weeks ago. They are babies. I was nervous to send them out. This is our first real public showing. We're taking the training wheels off with all of you today. But the 2019 vintage is gigantic. The wines are dark. Of the 3 wines you're going to have from Adversity today, this is the lightest in color. But the 17 that we have from Jean already is showing great polish and maturity. And there's a refinement to that wine. And then I was going back and forth between it and the Melanson. People probably saw I was drinking it at an accelerated pace. But the Melanson is then so massive and exuberant. And this is a child, but it has that front of the tongue, same base profile. It just does it magnified because it is so rambunctious. This is a Labrador Retriever puppy, and he sees you holding a fresh bone. This is a pure energy and drive right now.
Tasting your wine, Russell, and hearing you talk about it, one of the great things I've always recognized in any of the wines that you were involved with, and especially in these, is how well, tell them how you translate the vineyard, because one of your biggest talents for me has always been to make well extracted ripe wine without them ever being vulgar.
Well, like I do, and I think everybody who's a wine enthusiast knows, our job is to be a caretaker of the vineyard. The most important decisions we make are in the vineyard. Our job after that is to manage textures. And everybody who works for me knows that we do everything possible to make the back of the mouth tannins refined. So for the darkness of these wines and for how massive they are, my hope is that the back of the palate is relatively refined. And everything we do is geared towards that. And so even at the farming stage, we kind of changed how we farmed in Napa a couple of years ago for our products. We strip every leaf front and back of the clusters of all leaves. So it literally looks like our vines have no leaves from the top of the first cluster, morning side and afternoon side. And that puts you at great risk to sunburn and other things, but we're doing it as early as bloom. So before the flowers have turned into grapes, we start to strip leaves during the pollination process, and we get early season UV penetration into the grapes. And it's kind of like going to fake and bake before you go to Mexico. If you tan before you go, you don't burn. And when you get the UV penetration into the grapes, when they're still at that stage, they break down the green compounds that we call pyrazines. And you also get an enzymatic impact on the seeds, so you get more refined tannins and thicker skins. So we end up trying to make this massive wine through natural farming practices. And then when it gets to the winery, we're all about being delicate. Jean said that they don't foot stomp and get it all dirty. Well, my wife foot stomps all of our grapes. She puts on boots, little dry skin diving boots. We sanitize them with alcohol, and she literally gets in and foot stomps everything that we make. She's in there for up to 8 hours a day foot stomping, and it's real work. The grapes get up mid-calf, and it's like running at the beach. And people will come and say, oh, we'd love to come and stomp grapes. Well, grapes come in at 55 degrees, so it's cold. My wife's from Wisconsin, so she has a little bit of extra built-in cold toughness, but we'll foot stomp them the whole time, because the way we process these days is we optically sort, and we have destemmers and shaker tables, and it's an ocean of blueberries. And the blueberries need a little bit of juice. And so literally my bride will go in there and foot stomp everything all day long, so we're not breaking the seeds. Because if you mechanically break the grapes, you can break the seeds, and the seeds have the hard tannins, and we want to extract the refined skin tannins. And so everything we do is geared towards making massive concentrated wines with a polish and refinement to them.
How come your wife does all the hard job and you do nothing?
It's well, she's stronger and actually much more gifted than I am. But literally last year, she did, while I was in the vineyard and I was tasting ferments, she did all of the manual labor for all of our wines. She did the pump overs, the pulsators, the punch downs. My wife's just not my wife. She's half of this team 100%. And it's even more rewarding when the person you love then becomes part of the team and becomes such an active part so quickly. So adversity for us really is a labor of love.
You know, on your Melanson vineyard, Russell, what I really like is something that I also find often in Pritchard Hill is that almost irony, acidity, almost minerally acidity.
There,
You express it really well in your wine.
all three of these wines come from vineyards with red dirt, and there's going to be an iron or mineral quality. Almost, if you think about licking a number 2 pencil when you were a kid, that iron lead quality is going to come in all of these. And when we get to the Herba, the label of that, the labels are all painted by a German artist who paints with concrete. And when we went through all of his artwork, that one looked like a wound. And the Herba vineyard almost tastes like tartar. It's got such a beautiful iron quality to it. If you ever walk into a butcher's block and you smell that quality, it's got that. In all three of these wines have a big component of that iron ferrous-like quality to them. And I like that.
It's really nice because it helps that it really helps support your fragrance and your aromatics. It's very, very well done.
Okay, any questions about the first two wines or any of the babble that Jean and I have been throwing out there?
I have a question. How many cases are you making on the adversity and John on the debate? You know, because you're talking about, you know, manual processes that these are small production wines. So
we're averaging right around 200 cases per wine.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're doing 1,500 3-packs of the debate cab. So it's not much greater. It's kind of the same. It's said 250 cases per wine, but it's sold in 3-packs. And to make you guys understand what Chris, I think, is saying is wine is one of these subjects and fields and passion where I think volume relates to change. When you keep your volume really small, you can stay in the art form, in the detail, and the perfectionism of your passion. The greater, bigger brands, they have to start applying recipes, right? And when you start adding and applying recipes, you go towards more manufacturing than art, emotions, and details. Would you agree with that, Russell?
So this is a picture of, I hope that comes through. Can everybody see that those are a bunch of small bottles of wine?
Yeah.
So when Heidi and I started blending the adversity wines last year, that's a half bottle from every single barrel that we have. And she and I sat here at this table and we tasted every barrel and evaluated them. And we scored them on aromatics, textures, and flavors, and then typicity for the block. So we went through and put all of our blocks together and identified the barrels that had the highest level of excellence over 3 days. Jean, we don't spit. Luckily, we're at home. We have a pizza oven, an air fryer, and a sous vide. So we go into lockdown mode, but we go through and we evaluate everyone. And what's so crazy is you would think that all of a sudden you take out of 10 barrels, your 5 favorite and put them together and it'd be better than the whole. And that's not the case, because all of a sudden it becomes like having 5 lead guitar players in the same band all playing all over each other. And that's why we're looking at the aromatics, textures, and flavors all separately and then combining those as puzzle pieces to put them together to try to mold something that's the individual pieces can come together and make something more spectacular than the whole. And then you whittle things out as you go. But literally every barrel, the way we make wine, because we go from the fermenter directly to the barrel. So we don't rack the wines to tank. We don't put them from a fermenter to a tank and then barrel and let the juice homogenize. We work really hard on keeping each and every barrel its own entity. So the flavor difference from barrel to barrel, then you have the difference between the cooperages who make the barrels in the toast levels. And it's absolutely amazing. What John was saying earlier is when you first go into a marriage with a new winery, God, we both talk with our hands a lot, John.
Passion.
It's when you first enter into that relationship with a new vineyard, you go in saying, okay, I think this type of barrel is going to work. Then all of a sudden that type of barrel doesn't work. And then you make a change from one cooperage to another and you extrapolate what you think is going to happen. And in like any relationship, it takes time to understand those nuances. And as somebody who's a big believer in the concept of 10,000 hours to master a task, we don't have that luxury. We have so few hours every year during harvest, during primary fermentation to make changes, to master our skills and to identify the traits of excellence that go hand in hand from your fermentation style to the barrel to how you manage the vineyard is so complicated. People ask me how a perfect vineyard comes into play. And I say, my God, you have to start with the dirt and then the climate that you're in. And then you have to have a rootstock that complements the dirt that will survive the viruses and bugs that are there. Then a varietal like Cabernet that goes onto the rootstock because you graft a varietal onto a rootstock that matches the soil. Then you have to hope that the varietal and the soil match and that the rootstock provides a harmonious match. And then you go through from there to airflow, row orientation, and everything else. And it's so incredibly complicated. And we have so few times to make things perfect. And the jigsaw puzzle to excellence is, it's just the craziest roadmap you'd ever imagine. And there's times when all of a sudden you get to the final wine and you're like, oh my God, I actually did this. And Heidi and I had the opportunity to taste a couple of my older wines that I haven't had in my own cellar for 5 or 6 years last weekend. And I almost started to cry at one of them. I was so amazed that wine had developed into what it was. And that there's nothing accidental or easy. Everything here represents so many decisions and you've only got one shot to make it right.
Yeah, you're right. And ladies and gentlemen, Russell is really right. You have to understand when you write an essay, you trash it, we're following a vegetative cycle. And therefore, I'm obviously 47 years old, and if I'm lucky, I have another 30 shot at making wine. And so by making multiple wines, you exponentially learn faster. And learning is really key because I don't think neither Russell nor me believe in perfection. So we constantly look at how we can improve any given wine we make. And that's part of that love of how much winemaking, represents, farming represents. These deception of climatic changes and everything are really a big part of our DNA. And I think, all of these three wines are interesting because they're a sense of place. And in a sense of place, why? Because the beauty of Napa is really its consistency of climate and its diversity of soil. In Napa, you have 120 different soil variation. If you look at the geological map of Napa, it is absolutely as complex as it gets. And so all these different sites ultimately have an expression. It's a spice on the spice rack. It's an expression of a personality, of an origin, of an upbringing, and all of these different, themes and facets of the wine come in play. And the second wine for the debate that we're going to have is Sacrochet. Sacrochet is a plateau right above Auberge du Soleil, mid-valley, that is extremely chalky, and you can actually taste that. So that minerality, that chalkiness is definitely within the wine themselves. And Russell said absolutely perfectly. We're not here to globalize a taste. We're here to make sure that you taste, and especially with the debate, it's part of its concept. But Russell, with his single vineyard, is exactly the same. We're here to show you an expression of a site and you to like it more than others, or to like it in certain settings. And Sacrochet has that chalkiness, that minerality, that very distinct mouthfeel that brings it a very different personality. Again, the three wines of the debate are 100% barrel fermented. They're on skins, ladies and gentlemen, for about 21 to 28 days. And you have to understand everything you look for is within the skin. The colors, the tannins, the aromas, they're all within the skin. So it's really that contact with the skin, the stomping of Heidi, and then the punch downs and pump overs that really creates and gives the DNA. But then, of course, the DNA first and foremost is its origin, is the soil it sits in. Because just like you and I, we're going to be a complete different person if we are born in Wisconsin or in Switzerland or in California or in Germany. And our upbringing, all of that is part of that cleanse. What the French, with their beautiful accent, calls the terroir. It's actually the interaction of a plant with a climate and a soil and the people farming it. And that's where these three different sites, Sacrochet was that chalky white dirt that you can almost taste. It's almost like you can lick it, right? These are real true expression of these wines.
Where exactly is this vineyard, John?
Sacrochet is where Sloan is. You know, above Auberge,
Yes.
above Auberge du Soleil, on that plateau where Hall has their Rutherford facility as well.
Snowden. And so what I like about this wine is it's got more weight front to back, and you feel the weight in the tension on this, and it pushes down, and it's got a little bit more. The first wine had a great complexity to it. This has more of a total mouth push and an extra layer of fruit.
That you see, Russell,
it tastes purple, and I love purple.
And do you have a site that has that chalky soil that you work with? I'm sure there is, because you work with 170 some vineyards, and I think these type of soil have a tendency of not influencing, ladies and gentlemen, the pH of the wines, therefore that freshness, that tension, but also that minerality and chalkiness. What do you think, Russell?
Absolutely. I drive to make my favorite Pinots. I go down to Buellton and Santa Rita down in Santa Barbara County, because the soils are all like moon dust. And because they're so depleted nutritionally, those vines bring out some extra flavors and complexity from those sites, because they have to try to pull so much. There's so little natural carbohydrate and nutrient in those soils that they express their site so perfectly. And you then get the airflow and the sunshine, and all of those things are magnified in the wine in your canopy decisions, because the site's so naturally stressed. And this wine speaks to me of purity. And I always love the Snowden vineyard that's right in there, and it always had that weight and push. And I think this is a great example of that. What kind of oak do you use on your wines, John, on these?
So I build barrel programs. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really important what Russell has said. Every cooper, based on the wood that they either grow themselves or buy, will have a different perspective. And the same wine in 15 different coopers will actually end up tasting 15 different ways. And so I build my barrel programs based on the varietal and the site, because you want to constantly, again, for me, fill up what sometimes a site can miss, right? And so in the case of Sacrochet, because of that chalkiness, I go with more textural barrels. So I usually use Taranceau Bossuet 707 from Hadou to help a little bit more the textural aspect of the wine. And I usually am on this side at 75% of Newell.
I absolutely love Terranceau. They're one of my two largest coopers, but Terranceau does a great job of magnifying fruit flavors to me and then putting on some of that back of the palate weight. And I think that wine absolutely does that. I'm trying to think which of my two remaining would be the best fit to it. And I think it's going to be the Sage Ridge Vineyard, which is the red label. And I was nervous about the oak impact on these wines as they've only been in barrel bottle for a few weeks because we're using 100% new French oak. And if you ever come and visit Heidi and I at the winery, you'll notice that our winery doesn't smell like a winery. We scrub every barrel every month with proxy bicarbonate, citric acid, and then we rinse it. There's not a drip or a mark on anything. We power wash our drains every week. I shower 4 times a day and I've got issues with cleanliness and OCD that drives my wife's beautician nuts. She's like, you need to tell your husband you can't shampoo your hair 3 times every day, no matter what he says. But I like that level of clean. And well,
how many times do you shampoo your hair, Russell?
Well, my back at least twice a day. But I believe in cleanliness at the winery. And so we end up using 100% new French oak, not because I want the wines to have tannin and flavor from the oak, but because I love having a new vessel that has never had another wine in it, knowing that the last thing that touched the inside of that barrel before my wine was a flame. And so we pay, depending upon the cooper, up to $300 more per barrel to get extra age in their stave mills. So normally you get barrels that are 24 months of wood aging in France before they make the barrel. All of our barrels are French oak. And then we'll actually pay them to age it another 18 to 24 months to give us less oak impact in the wine. And when we put these to bottle, I told Chris I'm all in. I'm excited to showcase these wines, and they're showing a little more oak than I would normally like. These wines are going to, because they're 2019s. I believe they're the first 19s that anybody's had outside of wineries. That oak is going to integrate. And so I was a tad insecure about sending out such young wines, but with this second wine, the Herba, there's a richness, Sage, excuse me, there's a richness to the upper palate. When you taste this, you can lick the roof of your mouth and you feel this fabulous glycerin quality.
Yeah, you know, it's again, so first I really love that blue fruit with touches of red fruit in them. Where is that vineyard? Tell us about Sage.
So it's the next mountaintop over from Pritchard Hill. So it is, you look at Pat Coletto's old property, which is the other side of Lake Canopy, way up on top. This is that property. So as a crow flies, it's 2.4 miles from my Melanson vineyard, which makes it what, 2.8 from your first vineyard, Montagna. But it is a higher elevation. So the diurnal temperature change up there, and if I get geeky, Chris, somebody wave a hand, but up there, the nighttime temperature is about 4 degrees warmer than the valley floor, but during the height of the day, we're about 6 degrees cooler. So we don't have the same fluctuation and we don't have the same heat stress because the airflow is so good. So one of the things that we have to deal with now, and everybody's heard about the fires and we talked about it earlier, but these devil winds that have really pushed these fires the last several years are a reflection of climate change. And I don't care what caused it, and I don't debate it, but those devil winds used to come later in the end of October and the first part of November. But for the last decade, every year they come a little earlier, and now they're coming into August. So one of the biggest stresses as winemakers we have is keeping the dry winds from sucking all the moisture and desiccating the grapes and turning them into raisins. And so, whereas we're stripping our canopies, both sides up and down at the beginning of bloom, we used to put shade cloth on the afternoon side so the sun wouldn't burn and pull all the moisture out. Now, because the devil winds come from the east, I've actually started putting shade cloth up on the morning side or on the eastern side, because we have less to fear from sun than we do from these early dry winds that will absolutely steal your moisture and shrivel up your grapes and cause the grapes to shut down. And so we're right now dealing with all of these issues of more UV penetration, earlier UV penetration, consistent drought other than 19, which was the wettest year we've had in the last 100 years, but was a total anomaly. And when we talk about Napa, the best days of Napa are in front of us, because the red blotch we're dealing with now and the other diseases are forcing people to replant. And we're just now starting to understand proper row orientation, rootstock to vineyard, and all of these components that will allow us to maximize the quality of each and every site. When I joined the Oakville growers 8 years ago, at the very first meeting I attended, I stood up and people actually hissed at me when I was done talking, because I started commenting about how there's excellence in Oakville, but a third of Oakville shouldn't be planted to grapes. It should be planted to alfalfa or hay, because the soils are so heavy and deep that if you're going to have quality, the only things you can really grow are Pinot Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc. And I wanted to come up with a DOCG system like they have in Italy, where you represent farming excellence along with site excellence in honoring people who take a piece of dirt that's fabulous and then maximize it. And when I got done pontificating on my new theories in my very first meeting, I literally had people, one person booed and one person hissed. But that's how insecure and underdeveloped Napa is. Half of this valley is planted to the wrong varietal. 2/3 of it's planted to the wrong row orientation and rootstock. We're just learning and figuring out what we need to do. And the next 20 years is going to bring along so many wines that are vastly improved over what we have today, because we're learning from the mistakes and we're starting to understand the future with our climate change.
And then I think something that Russell said that is quite important, ladies and gentlemen. I think the last 30 some years were really big improvement on the winemaking side, the microchemistry of the wine, and the next 50 are going to be vineyard driven, estate fruit driven, farming driven, climate condition driven, as Russell mentioned. May I ask you guys? I mean, you have tasted about 4 wines now. Is there any comments, questions that you guys want to talk about, and tell us a little bit, about what you're seeing or what you're liking or not, and what are any comments? Just unmute yourself and talk. Chris always has questions, so if we could make sure that we stop him from asking questions, that'd be great, because I'm really tired of hearing him. So anybody, ask any question. Yeah, whatever you want. Where I bought my glasses, but not Chris. Don't let him speak.
Your second wine is now developing a layer of cherries that wasn't there to begin with, and I love how the fruit is starting to pop. And the Pritchard Hill has gotten another level of aromatics. And what I think is catching me off guard is I would normally expect the level of fruit pop that I'm getting from the second wine to come from Pritchard Hill. And Pritchard Hill is giving us the textures that I sometimes think about in Rutherford. How you get this much fruit out of Rutherford compared to a Pritchard Hill, I think is absolutely amazing.
Thanks. Well, it's time of picking. I mean, Russell, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that we have to explain at one point before we move to the 2 last wines is, I think this wonderful country of ours is absolutely amazing to compensate sometimes for the lack of history by learning faster than others. But like wine is fairly modern in the US compared to obviously Georgia, which is the birth of wine 12,000 years ago. Some people say it's Persia, northern Persia, 10,000 and whatever. But ultimately, that particular history that they have, we didn't have it in the US, and we compensate by learning faster and actually inventing and being more entrepreneurial. And I really think that this is something that the US does extremely well. And the downside sometimes of that is going through trends. We go through trends. And we had a trend in the 90s and 2000 where people picked fruit overripe, too ripe. And I think that now we have learned, just like in the industry, to pick fruit, and that's where I think I get some of that fruitiness, to pick the fruit slightly earlier to make sure on a portion, to make sure that I get some of that fresher fruit aromas.
Hey, guys, can I interrupt just for a second here? Jean, I think this is just a great conversation, you guys. Russell, I have one question for you, and I also want to mention the dinner. I'm curious, you mentioned that the valley's going to, that other varietals, well, you said half the valley or a third of the valley is planted with the incorrect varietal. So I'm curious what you see going forward over the next 20 or 30 years. Is it more cab, or what's the mix? And the other point that I want to make before we get into the last two wines here is that to all the audience, Russell and John have generously offered to host a dinner at Russell's property with Heidi and with Jean's wife Chelsea, and for a party of 8, up to a party of 8, and the proceeds from that dinner will go to the Napa Valley charity that we're donating to, and
during that meal, I promise you, Russell will strip for us, because I don't get to his house if he doesn't at least give me a lap dance in front of people. So don't worry.
I would pay to not see that personally. So this is it is for the charity. All the proceeds will go to the Napa Valley Community Center, and it is tax deductible. So they've offered this in the past, or Russell's done this in the past, and it starts out at $5,000. So it's not cheap, but it goes to a good cause, and there's absolutely no pressure to bid on this. But if you're interested, just go ahead and mention in the chat box that you're, whatever your bid is. Okay.
And somebody asked, what do you think about 100% Petit Verdot? Well, Laura, I make a few wines that are 100% Petit Verdot, and it started because somebody asked me, what's your favorite varietal in Napa Valley? And if you look, there's absolutely tremendous cabs that are produced outside of the valley, in Bordeaux and some parts of Italy and Spain. And at that time, I said Petit Verdot because I don't think there is, outside of maybe, but not as consistently in Spain, outstanding Petit Verdot. And I think that Petit Verdot is used often, and was in Bordeaux, as a blender, right? As something to give a little bit more structure and density. But for me, the most beautiful wines are usually, Petit Verdot is even greater when it's 100% because it shows its true color and it's true. So yes, usually it's pretty big and it's pretty structured and stuff like that, but it really shows its personality. What do you think, Russell, about 100% Petit Verdot?
I've made 100% Petit Verdot, and the wine was stunning. And Robert Parker called it the greatest single Petit Verdot we ever tried. And I dropped the mic and I decided never to do it again.
That's funny. Can I tell you another story? I made 100% Petit Verdot, and the wine spec told me the best Petit Verdot ever made in the US.
Okay,
we're meant to be together.
So Jean, I'll bring mine when we host this dinner if you bring yours.
Deal. Deal.
Hey guys, this is Jason. I'm going to jump in real quick. So I'll start the bidding right now at the minimum bid of 5,000. So if anybody wants to jump in, feel free. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to come and join you guys.
Well,
Thanks,
throw
Jason.
a few things out that we were going to do for the dinner. We have one of our interns last year recently graduated from CIA. He is a fabulous chef. As mentioned, we have a pizza oven, and we would probably plan on doing 7 or 8 courses. I'd love to let John pair wines with 3. I would love to pair wines with 3. And then Heidi and I would love to finish everything with a Klaus Peter Keller Trockenbeer Nasseles. I think he's the finest white winemaker in the world today. Heidi and I love his wines. And last year we bought every half bottle of his Trockenbeer Nasseles that came into the United States. And we would love to share one of those with all of you. There was only 36 that came in, but we would also start the afternoon with a fabulous game of Krug Pong. Most people play beer pong, but here Heidi and I like to play with Krug. So we start off our afternoons very decadently here at the Estates.
Yeah, guys, we'll for sure make sure to drown you in great wines, and I promise you it won't only be the wines that we make, because you know, as I love to say, you know, you don't want to read a book that you wrote, so you know, we collect wine a lot. Both Russell and I, and I like to say I don't have a 401k, but I have a very, very large wine cellar. I think I'm at up to 10,000 bottles right now, which is a fairly good amount of wine sitting, because I can't stop buying wines from others, Russells and others, because you learn from them, you know, much more than you learn from your own, because by the time they're in the bottle, you've tasted them 50, 100 times. And it's always interesting to taste, you know, other wines because they create different emotions.
Okay, well, my favorite Lynch Bage was the 89.
Me too.
I will open 89 Lynch Bage as one of your representative wines at the meal, so I can have you explain the estate and chateau to us while I'm sipping upon it, sir.
With pleasure, and I agree. I did back in the days, I did a vertical from, it was, I think, 1955 to 2000, and my favorite of all vintages, obviously, as you know, you have press and you do that with press and stuff like that, was 89 by a mile, by a mile.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Can we taste, so my Herba Cab is 25% Petit Verdot. So as we're talking about it, I would love for everybody to try this wine, because earlier when I was talking about the minerality and the iron and that almost bloody quality, this wine exudes that quality. And I know that's not necessarily the most seductive way to describe a wine, but if there were vampires among us, this wine would sell out fast.
I see what you mean. That's funny.
I worry that this wine's going to be a little too polarizing, because it is so intense and meaty, and it almost has a feral quality. There's a wildness to this wine. It's primary, and when I was a kid and I'd lick my cuts, and when we picked that label, it's because it looked like a cut, and it's like, yep, that the wine has that intensity, and I just love how primary it is.
But you know, in addition to the primary, so what's your skin contact on this, Russell? Tell us a little bit about the winemaking that you did this, because again, you have that irony, kind of, you know, almost freshness that is there to support the wine that has. It's very diverse. You know, for me, it's a wine that explode in almost porcupine style, with so many little spikes of so many different things. How did you make that wine?
And so Heidi and I have developed with a company called Pulsar Product, and I have no vested interest in this, but we, instead of doing a pump over or a punch down, mechanical things that can break the seeds, we're using a product called Pulsar, and we've actually plumbed our tanks for it. And you can watch, this is a fermentation. I'm going to try to get so you can see those bubbles. See how it's bubbling up? It looks alive. That's us blowing air Uh-oh, you're about to see me look, I'm so excited. Like, look at this, it's so cool. But it burbles and it completely homogenizes and breaks up a cap, and it gently extracts the tannins. And so going back to, when you look at this wine and you look at its color, it's so dark, you would think that it's almost going to be hard as nails. You look at it and your mind says, oh my goodness, I better prepare for this. But then texturally, it's so polished. It's a bloody 19, only in the bottle 4 weeks. But everything we do comes down to managing textures. When you work with vineyards, the quality of what we do, your job is to manage the balance and knowing that the vineyard's voice and the aromatics are eventually going to shine through. And so everything we do is geared towards producing decadent textures.
Honestly, it's magnificent, magnificent, and I really again like that interact. So I think what I tried to said previously about your wines in general, you really have that talent of bringing extreme fruitiness without ever being heavy. You bring extreme texture without being vulgar. So it's always, you always have a counterbalance in your wine to their biggest praise and quality, right? You, as humans, we say that we always have faults of quality and qualities of fault. I think these wines show always a counterbalance that makes them balance, despite these extreme, aromatics and fruitiness, and that you always have on the other side that irony, beautiful kind of acidity and freshness, and you have tannins, but they're extremely granular and melted. It's a really, really impressive.
Do you sense the saline quality late on the finish? I still get a saltiness, and I love that quality. And if so, right now, Heidi and we have Frescobaldi olive oil, which has a bitterness to it. The Frescobaldis press their olives a little less ripe than others to try to capture more of that white pepper and a little firmness. And so we're drizzling that over bread here. But this is the kind of wine that so absolutely wants to be captured with a pot roast that you started early in the day. That minerality and the saline quality just is going to complement something that's cooked all day long. It's
it's you know what I really like with your Urbais is that salinity or freshness that lingers. You have a really, it carries, right? So that salinity and almost minerality kind of pulls the wine longer, deeper, and I really, really like that aspect.
I've had a couple sommeliers, master somms I poured this to, who accused me of making a Northern Rhone blend and calling it Cabernet, because it has some true Syrah-like quality, the meatiness, the gaminess, but it absolutely comes from that fabulous Petit Verdot.
Yeah, it's really, really neat.
So Dennis?
Gary, actually, my husband.
Hello.
Denise, sorry.
My name's Gary Lewis. So I just listened to all the conversations and I was hearing about Montagna, and I believe we're at the vineyard maybe about 12 years ago under a different label. So I was just asking if it says Tre Vigna, which was the 3 vines, if this looks familiar, if this was one of the first wines under the bait that we were drinking. So
actually it's the same, it's a different one from the same vineyard. You're absolutely right. So it is exactly the same location than the Artelade Montagna vineyard. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Up on Pritchard Hill, correct?
Yes, correct. You're absolutely right. It's exactly that site. I get all the west-southwest exposure block of Montagna, and then they get another part of that vineyard. Yeah.
It is absolutely beautiful, beautiful vineyard. I would say it was one of the most stellar views of overlooking the valley that we've seen. And we were very fortunate to have a few hours alone there with a small group. So,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That good, good a good memory and good putting the dots together. It is a beautiful site. You have a view on a lot of the valley, and as Russell said, as far as winemaking, you really have that day and night kind of buffer effect on the heat of the valley during the day, and on not too cold during the night. That is really helpful for wine growing, and especially for phenolic ripeness of tannins and aromas and color.
yes, it was a beautiful area and certainly very good quality. So very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you.
So here's how crazy the economics of Napa are. And I have no idea what Jean's contracts are like, but I know what my contracts are like. And so today, Jeb Dunnick came out with his new reviews, and the whole valley was abuzz. And one of the wines that I'm making is from a famous vineyard owned by Andy Beckstoffer. And, you know, it's so crazy that I spent $108 per bottle for the grapes for that wine. The economics of winemaking at this point in time have gotten so extreme. And if you're lucky and you're Jean and you grab that contract early and you get to carry it on, you can make wine. But the economics and reality of Napa Valley are going absolutely haywire right now.
So,
And Beckstoffer can charge that because his farming quality in his sites generate buzz, and if it says Dr. Crane or Tokalam, you get that extra cachet. But all of a sudden, with 2020 being cut in half, and John, I wanted to discuss this before we were done today, but all of a sudden there's a huge demand for grapes because people don't have 2020s to sell, and they're going to have a year without cash flow. And all of a sudden the valley's getting a little more tighter and constricted because people are concerned about their cash flow in the future. But making wine in Napa is no longer an easy, simple thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because ladies and gentlemen, the average price of cab, and those are the sites that Russell mentioned that are just average because they're not planted either the right way, the right orientation, the right rootstock, or the right soil, and the combination of rootstock, etc. But the average price is roughly $7,000. To give you an idea, the Pritchard Hill or the Toglon can go up to $30,000 to $35,000 a ton. So you have to realize that Napa has become, and these special terroirs, these special places have really become a really big part of the DNA, the price issue, and all of that, because now that these terroirs have been recognized, they're really well thought after. And so people, the demand is really high because these terroirs gives these type of wines. And they are a game changer. And yes, 2020, because of these fires, and you know, a lot of some people have made wine because they were in luckier situation than others. But 2020 has shifted the demand because, in a way, some of them didn't have cash out in 2020 because either they decided not to pick or they had to claim insurance and stuff like that. But their need for grapes, as Russell said, increases in 2021. So it's going to be a very dynamic market, that's for sure.
And did you make wine in 2020, Jean?
I did not on most sites because most sites were fairly later ripening sites and were fairly exposed. And after doing micro fermentation, it was reeking smoke, and but not even subtle. It was reeking. And I know that a lot of people that I trust, you know, and truly our friends, made wine. So I believe and I trust their judgment that the quality will be there. In my case, I was not that lucky.
You know, so in 2017, there was fires, but in 2017, it was based upon when you picked your potential impact for smoke. In 2020, it depends upon where you're located. And for instance, Pritchard Hill, the wine we're tasting right now, obviously that area got hammered with smoke. But then there's things South Valley down by the city of Napa that are on the valley floor that the micro fermentations, because you could do a small fermentation and send in the results and actually get a test back that measured all of the smoke compounds that had virtually zero impact. And so in 2020, there are going to be amazing wines. I'm sure the wines you did ferment, John, like mine, they're the darkest vintage I've ever made.
Yeah.
The level of extraction is amazing, but that there's going to be an ocean of wine that has smoke taint, but then there's going to be wines that are truly spectacular. Some of the most exciting textural wines I've ever made were in 2020. That vintage was setting up for perfection, is as close as we can have vintage wise. And I'm just going to tell people that don't be afraid of buying 2020, just like there was people afraid of buying 2017s, and we're tasting John 17s. And right now these wines are bloody fabulous. Just like that, there's going to be great wines in 2020. Some of them equal of some of the greatest vintages we've ever made, but it's going to be site to site more than when you picked, which is what happened with 17.
Yeah, and this is, Jason, if I could interject for a minute. I found it quite fascinating driving the different areas within Napa and seeing different road closures while we were there happened to be because of the fires. So we left on a Saturday morning in September, and the next day after we left, the resort where we were at, Meadowood, evacuated. And I was amazed looking at the different road closures that existed, because the roads that we went to get to Maxville Winery or some of the other wineries and the tastings that we did, one by one started to close. And it was amazing. The next day after that was when the fires came through, and actually, many of the places we were at in Meadowood, parts of that actually were burned down 2 days after we left. So it was amazing to see how the fires had progressed from one spot to another during that period.
Yeah, it was difficult and sad times for sure.
So John, along with the fires, we're now dealing with heat and hot wind differently. Are you using any mitigation practices? Do you have pulse misters in vineyards? Do you have overhead sprinklers? What tools? Because I think moving forward in Napa, consumers that are buying wines at the super premium level need to have faith that their wineries are doing everything humanly possible to maximize quality. And I think moving forward with global warming, heat mitigation is going to be a huge part of that. And when I do my winter pruning is changing. I'm pruning later because I want later bud break, and I'm changing lots of things. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Trying to delay and postpone, ripening, and you mentioned shade cloth, you mentioned misters, you mentioned overhead sprinklers, every single strategy that we can to postpone that. But you mentioned something for me, Russell, that is really, really important as well. You mentioned changing the shade cloth for winds. I changed my canopy management for heat in morning, and now I barely touch the outside of canopy, and I only do tunneling inside of the canopy. And tunneling, ladies and gentlemen, is just removing the inner leaves a little bit of the inside of the canopy to keep the outside protected. Why? Because in many years over the last couple of the last decades, we saw a few days where it was really hot all through the night, and then the sun rise in the morning and you already burn your fruit. And so that was really, really where usually you would see dehydration on the afternoon side, which gets usually pounded by warmer sun and stuff like that. You started seeing a really hot temperature on the morning side. And so I started adapting quite a bit to that as well.
Okay, so I manage my canopies completely different than John does. And I'm sure you're absolutely right, but I'm sure I'm absolutely more right. I think that you have to, because the ripening cycle is shortening, and as John said, we try to extend the growing season. We want to pick as late as possible without having overripe fruit. The Gigals who make the lalas in the Northern Rhone, they say the most perfect site to grow a grape is the site where 6 out of 10 vintages you pick the last day before the first rain, because you want as much hang time as possible to get the seductive tannins, the anthocyanins that give you the color and all of those compounds. And so right now we're doing everything we can to gain those dates. And Jean is using a practice that guarantees him those extra days where I'm taking a much bigger risk. I'm at the precipice and I have to tell my owners, look, if you own this vineyard, you're going to have to turn your overhead sprinklers on 6 days in a row, because without that cool down from the water, we're going to lose all of our fruit. And there's so many vineyards where you don't have that water just because we're in droughts. And we use pulse misters, like if you're going into a bar in Scottsdale and it mists and that uses half as much water, but you would then have to pay for that. And it's incredibly complicated figuring out how to manage your canopy, your water, and all of these things. And this debate and the change in the mindset of how to achieve excellence is changing every year right now. And you're investing in wines from wineries that don't have people that are completely invested in every aspect of it, you're going to end up being disappointed.
Yeah, and to finish, Russell, the last one, the Denali on the debate side, is actually a little bit of a warmer site. It's above Phelps in Saint Helena, southwest facing, and that's a very early site. It's actually a site that usually is the first red that we pick, usually in September already, early September in most years, and usually a site that shows a little bit more volume and lushness and ripeness. It's a fairly sandy soil on terraces, on actually 23-year-old vines up there. It's owned by the Schlottfelds and a really, really amazing site. And if you look at what we did, it's kind of you in a way. We decided to do the debate all hillside, all mountain fruits, all from the Vaca range, which is the eastern mountain range of Napa Valley, you know, pretty much 3.5 miles from one another, and express these different, you know, these different profiles in a way. And again, it's a mood, so depends what mood you're in. But I can tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, we try our best, and we're gonna keep on trying our best, because we obviously love what we do. That's for sure.
This wine pulls your hair a little bit in all the right ways. And I like that the tannin has some focus there, and it forces you to pay attention to your palate. And I literally, I took my first sip and then I dipped bread into the olive oil, and I was excited to see what that olive oil would do, because this is the kind of wine that benefits so much from, from food. That tannin is going to get eaten up by a little bit of fat or butter or olive oil or whatever, allowing the fruit flavors to then expand, because there's so much wrapped up in this wine. It's going to gain so much with time. And there's just a persistence to this that I think benefits from food and is a natural complement to a great meal.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm gonna maybe not shock you, Russell, but you know that, ladies and gentlemen, we measure tannins and milligrams per liter, and I'm a tannin lover, and I really tend to extract 30,000 to 35, which is sometimes twice as much, tannins. But the question is, how do you polymerize it? How much do you soften it to have them present? Because for me, they're a big part of the personality of Cabernet in general. And so on sites like Denali, I think tannins come to structure also that lushness and that kind of explosion of fruitiness and warmth.
Sorry, my mouth is full. But the olive oil absolutely did complement this beautifully. So I'm a big fan of short skin contact. In you like, I assume you're doing extended maceration. Once the grapes are dry, you leave them on the skins, correct?
It depends, actually. I actually varied from 100. So if I take 2006 to today, I did everything from 120 days on skin to 6 days on skin. Now I am more in the 21 days and like that.
And so what Heidi and I do is we're actually fermenting them almost dry. We'll do a 5-day cold soak. In our winery, we designed it such that our tanks have double thick glycol on the sides and on the bottom. So we can do a very cold soak. And during the cold soak, you don't do a lot of pump overs or punch downs, but you're trying to get the water soluble tannins out before primary starts, where you can start to pull out some of the more aggressive tannins. So we're then going from cold to hot, and by having all this extra glycol in the bottom of the tanks and the sides and pulse air, which homogenizes, we go from cold to hot very quickly. But then we'll press sweet, and our wines are bone dry, but we'll press them sweet and let them finish in oak. And that accomplishes a few things. One, you then get the oak tannins to further help bond with the skin tannins to lock in your colors and your anthocyanins. So it helps us get these very dark wines. But additionally, we don't ferment above 80 degrees. So a cooler ferment's going to extract more fruit flavors. I'm expecting the vineyard in that site to give me complexity with age. So I'm just looking at capturing the skin tannins without the heat and alcohol buildup that you get late in ferment, which can pull the seed tannins out. And so that's how we're capturing these massive dark black wines without them being overly phenolic on the back of the palate. What John is saying, and I don't want to speak for you, but you're allowing the wines to ferment longer, so those other tannins bind together naturally in the fermentation. So you're getting longer phenolic compounds, where I'm stopping when I only have longer compounds. You're allowing your other tannins to bind up and then complement each other. And talk to us about what's happening there compared to what I'm doing, John.
Well, I mean, it's a phenomenal called mainly polymerization. And polymerization, so you guys have done this, tannins, that drying impression reacts with your saliva. And when you polymerize tannins and they bind with either other tannins, anthocyanin, which is color components, or some polysaccharides, other components of the wine or the barrel, actually tannins, most of the time, they create longer chain. And these chains don't react with your saliva the same way. So I'm kind of adding those, making sure that these kind of molecular bind to give you that mouthfeel. That's really what I do, and it's all naturally done. By the way, it's not adding anything. You do that with oxygen. You do that with wood. You do that with minimal sulfur. You do that with temperature. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish that Russell knows as well as me. And so we work a lot on that to give these type of texture and mouthfeel with these quantity of tannins.
And so we come at it completely differently. And when Chris first said, "I'd love you to do this with Jean," I was excited because he's somebody I respect and consider to be a very good friend. That in Napa, what's great is there's not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of winemakers who hate other winemakers. It's not like the normal business environment. Jean and I are part of the same lunch group that gets together a couple times a year, and that there's no animosity or stress, and everybody shares how they make wine. Everybody's comfortable saying, "Oh, this is my secret. This is how I do it. Here's the back of my curtain." And it's a very open attitude. I think it's because people then think, well, I'm going to farm my vineyard better than they will. I'll make better decisions. I'll blend better than they do. I'll spend more time doing my due diligence on what I have in barrel and in the standards of excellence that we propose in our winery. But there's no competition in tension like this. when I heard this, I was like, it's going to be interesting because I do things completely different than John, but his wines represent the same level of quality that mine do. And that's why I think it's fascinating that qualitatively your wines and my wines, at least in my mind, are equal, but they're so completely different. You bring a level of refinement and we bring a level of bombacity. And that bombacity is partially because they're so young, but when Beetlejuice was staring at everybody away from you and his face went blah, I kind of like that. And I want my wines to have a little bit of that quality.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for the compliment. Obviously, I don't think I don't need to tell you how much I respect what you have done. We've from your Boswell years to now. I always love hearing you talk and sharing and even when we have to bitch at things that makes us mad in the industry, we do it together and we respect that. And yeah, our wines are different, and I think that's also the beauty of it. Is I have lots to learn from you. There's no doubt about that.
And Jason Hill, did you have a question? Jason? Yeah, you're looking up the mountain behind you. Maybe you were just scratching your ear, but I thought a minute ago you waved your hand or said it looked like you may have had a question.
Thanks. No question. Just enjoying this. It's a real pleasure to get both the winemakers at this level, right?
What is the mountain behind you, Jason?
It's a stock photo from someplace in Oregon, but I'm in Orange County, California, so I don't know. Just yeah.
Okay. Jason, did you have a question?
I can make one up.
No. I was talking about the other Jason.
The other Jason.
No, you make one up. We want to know what Orange County's got on their mind tonight.
Oh gosh. Well, the rain just started and it's cold, which cold for us is it's probably 50 degrees, but it feels like 10. I'm fascinated by, and I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't get to enjoy your side of it, Russell. I've only ordered the Cab Sauvs from Jean, and I'm really fascinated by this Denali. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ripest, sexiest expression of a cab. It's really southwest facing, and if you know orientation, that is where you get a lot of warmth into that site. It's fairly well drained, sandy, rocky soil. So really berries that usually are fairly small but are well protected because it's a lyre training. So the terraces, if you want, kind of the leaves. And the canes kind of fall down to protect the grapes from being overexposed. Because they're so early ripening, we can do that without fearing greenness or not enough ripeness. So we actually let the canopy kind of fall to provide shade, but they still ripen that early because it's so draining as a soil that the plant really struggles for nutrients and water and really kind of pushes that type of extraction and fruitiness. And there's always with Denali, there's always a textual component to that is almost velvety, almost sexy. And I have to ask, Russell for advice. That's why I was spending so much time asking him about never making, because sometimes Denali, if you're not really careful, can become a little bit too much. And I really like that Russell doesn't have that too much.
So let me just say that the Denali wears Manolo Blahnik pumps that are at least thigh high and lace up the front. This is a wine that, no, on a first date, she wears an outfit that makes you a little nervous. This wine has some sex appeal to it,
Russell, I think what you saw with my hand was I was handing my wife, who came in and remained, because of the background, remained out of camera, but she she wanted to, sip them all. And she took a smell of the Denali and her face went south. And then she took a sip of it and her face went, lit up. But she's familiar with Manolos too. So, so I'm in trouble there with between Manolo and the French guy, the Christian Louboutin. I'm really sideways, but this is really exceptional to try these and hear you guys, right? This is way beyond my level of expertise, but I love hearing what the depth that you're going to, and all the nuances, and I hear the passion, and then I can taste the passion. So it's a real pleasure. So thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.
Yeah, and this is Jason Johnson. So Jason Hill, thank you very much for those comments. And I'd like to thank both of you guys and Chris for putting this on, because as you notice too, I have a different background. So my other background was in the office. Now I'm here with our guests. So we'll let them kind of all wave to you if you're able to see them. But we'd like to thank you guys for all the expertise and like you said, having great wine with great company is what it's all about. So I'll certainly never forget this evening. And
Yeah, cheers to you all. I left my email and my cell at the very beginning of the chat room. At any given point, guys, if you have any wine questions about whatever wine you're picking up and wanting to drink or anything, feel free. Russell and I are extremely passionate about what we do, and we're here to, not only for this event, but for anything else that you would need, and we do what we do because we love what we do. So,
Jean, before we wrap this up, and if people have to log off, I'm totally with that. But I would like to taste through all three of your wines and break them down and explain to everybody what I think of them in an honest, brutal manner. And I'd love for you to do the same. And I won't pull punches. And I would hope that you would do the same with my wines.
Of course.
And, my wife. I don't know what she just said, but I think she just said may have said, "Be careful, big boy."
Oh, funny. Go for it. I actually value that a lot.
So, okay. May I go first, John?
Go for it.
Because okay. I'm using my flashlight to make sure I read everything. This is how I know I'm going. Okay. The Ardelade Cabernet Sauvignon, 2017. Okay, when I saw that we were drinking 2017s from Jean, my first thought was, okay, I'm going to see how well he picked and how well he mitigated heat. Because people in 2017 talk about fire. Fire wasn't the big issue in 2017. The fact that we had 35 days over 100 degrees was the biggest impact in 2017. And so when you taste the 2017s, you have to look, okay, is this somebody who farmed to protect or not? And with this wine, instantly I knew there was no issues with somebody who didn't farm to protect for heat and who didn't have an issue with fire based on when they picked. And that said, okay, we're gonna rock and roll on John 17s. And as this wine's opened up, it's pulled back on the palate. I still love that it's cherry and blackberry, and there's a verve and an acidity to this that I think is absolutely fabulous. There's a hint of mocha that I get from the oak, maybe even, is this Terenceau also, Jean?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say celery seed, but almost that beautiful green quality that Terenceau magnifies it sometimes. And I like this wine's linear intensity and the purity of fruit. And it's a fabulous compact package that keeps me salivating. And I love that purity of fruit. We go to the second wine, Denali, and I'm just going alphabetically in my line. And wow, this just brings another level of intensity, whereas the first wine was sophisticated. This is a party. This is a wine who wants to just bounce at you.
I like that.
Here it's plum cherry, but you get that energy on the front of the tongue that makes you salivate. And it's mouth watering. And this is the wine that's going to make your teeth purple and your lips purple. And that power that's restrained and never is overwhelming, and your palate is treated with a coating quality, and it's never painful, is absolutely fabulous. Then we go to our Rutherford, and it's deep. There's an extra layer of weight, and it's a little more serious aromatically to me. Yeah, Sacré, I'm sorry. Of the three wines, it's the furthest back on my palate. I like that weight and power. You talked about tannins earlier. This wine is so incredibly tannic, but it's not a bad tannin. When I talk about so incredibly tannic, it has all of that weight in the back, but it's never a bitter tannin. It's always a supple tannin, and it comes at you in waves. And I bet if we did dry extract tests, and so Heidi and I send all of our wines out to the lab, and we have them evaporate the whole bottle and weigh what's left. So I know what my dry extracts are, because I want to know where my wines are at. And this wine has a fabulous weight to the back that I said would just have a great dry extract. But we go from polish and subtle beauty to exuberance and energy and lift, and then we go to tension and power and concentration. And each one of these wines is so individual, and it's a signature of a winemaker who doesn't want the winemaking style to dictate the wine, but somebody who wants the vineyard to speak. And I think that's a fabulous lineup, John.
Thanks. It's gonna be hard to beat the comment like that. Your wine are much better than mine, but that's a whole different story. But I'm gonna start with you, Manson. At first, I really like the fact that you're pouring 19. It's a gutsy move, and I think that 19 is a tremendous year. I think you're right, because I had that thought to bottle them maybe a little bit earlier is for me something that is a right choice. So I'm going to start with obviously what you called your blue label. I really love that flowery component with subtle fruit aromatics on the nose. None of the three wines, I can already tell, have what sometimes fall in Napa Valley as far as an over extraction or an over ripeness. You don't. You have that lifted fruit. You have within ripe grapes, you have that subtlety, and I like that. I really, really love that quite a bit.
Okay, now that we're doing this and you're talking about my wines, I'm incredibly uncomfortable.
Good, because that's what it's supposed to be.
And you know I love you, but now I want you to stop. But I know I did yours. But I know you're probably the same way. I take our wines. We take our wines so personal. We manage the vineyard. My wife does the work at the winery. They're so personal, and I don't do many public tastings anymore. This is my third Zoom this year, and the other two were for charity events. And I care, and I get emotionally wrapped up in the wine so much. And I don't like doing tastings because I don't always respond well. And then I become an uptight, crabby little boy the rest of the day if I hear things I don't like. And because all of these decisions are, we picked the vineyard, we decided on that site and how to farm it and everything. And it's so emotional and personal. And if you're making wine and you don't take it emotionally and personally, you shouldn't be making wine.
No, I agree. I agree. It's so an expression of your belief. And honestly, Russell, every single time I go in the vineyard to taste grapes, or I go and taste ferments, or I blend, I call it liquid poetry because it either sings or talks to me. And when I blend, and we do that quite a bit, obviously, because ladies and gentlemen, even within single vineyards, you have different barrels or different lots or different that you end up putting together, which is called blending. And when I blend, I usually compare the wine to art pieces. Some sculptures are Botero, round and voluptuous. Some sculptures are Giacometti and linear and austere. Some sculpture are Tanguy like or disjointed and all over the place. And when you blend, you really kind of attach a perception to the wine that is almost human. And that's where Russell is absolutely right into what we do and how we do. And I really love, Russell, I'll just say this, not to put on the spot with your 3 wine. I love the progression. Because they're different wines, but they have each an individual personality. You start with subtle and finesse on the first. You have a little bit more density and a little bit more fruit, darker blue fruit on the second. And then you have the herba vineyard that is really just as I call it, the porcupine. It's not the right term because it's not spiky. It's a Milky Way of impressions. How about that?
It's fabulous.
Mhm.
So
Matt-
guys, I hope you enjoy wine.
Matt and Rachel, can we get a thought from you guys? Because it's been fabulous watching your facial expressions. It's obvious that you both love wine, but Rachel, you especially, can you give us a thought here, please?
So we do love wine, but clearly do not have the palates that you professionals do when you start saying things, porcupines and, very illustrative terms. We're like, it just tastes really good.
That's all it, honestly, Richard, that's all it is. It's an emotion. When Russell goes and smells roasted macadamia nuts and from Maine, etc. That's us. But if you taste your grandmother's pie or the fruit you used to pick in your garden or stuff like that, it's just an emotional response. And if your emotional response is, oh, that's just really good, it triggers an emotion. The worst enemy for me in wine is indifference. And it has happened once to me, where I said, oh, I'm a winemaker, I make wine and stuff. And the person was like, huh? It's because they were not drinking, right? They were not drinking wine because it is liquid poetry and we try to write it the best way we can.
Yeah.
This has been a joy. We really, really appreciate being able to be in your living rooms with you guys tonight.
Okay, Laura, you're up. You're leaning in yeah. Sorry, so you have to get called out, but talk to us. Was there one of the wines today that you really connected to?
We have to say that the Sacre was one of my favorites. It was wonderful. And we've had a great experience tonight. Thank you guys so much.
Well, thanks for your great questions. And thanks again for being in touch with our sensitivity, I guess.
Yeah, it's been wonderful.
That's awesome.
Okay,
You want to
Chris,
put anyone else on the
where do
spot
we
there,
sit
Russell?
here? What's that?
I said, do you want to put anyone else on the spot?
I want to ask Karen's dog what she thinks, but
Cheers. Hey, I guess we still have 15 people on here amazingly after 2 hours, so that's says a lot about the conversation, I think.
Yeah, the guy who was from UCLA dropped out, and I was going to talk some basketball trash as a Gonzaga Bulldog, but
he saw it coming, so he bailed. Hey, really want to thank you guys. This was a fascinating conversation. It was everything and more than what I'd hoped for. I just, I share, Rachel's comments and everyone's, comments that, it's been like being in the living room with you guys and hearing you talk wine. I've always wanted to hang out with you guys and listen to you talk wine. So this is, I mean, you went down some rabbit holes. You got really geeky. You are also, just flat out interesting on the way that you approach it. And it's really, it's refreshing to hear you guys talk about it. So thank you very much. Jason, I want to thank you again for requesting, of UBS to put something together to donate to the glass fire victims. I think it was a great idea, and it's manifested in this way, and it's a great thing. So I really just I'm very appreciative. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, Jason, thanks a lot for putting that together. That was amazing. Thanks for your effort, Chris.
It's awesome. Okay, a couple things though. Heidi, you want to share something?
Oh, I was just gonna say that if you end up, coming out for the dinner, you won't be disappointed. Russell and I love hosting people at our house. We love showing people a great time. And between the two of you guys as the winemakers and what kind of wine will be brought and tried, 5,000 won't even compare to the experience you're gonna get.
It's at 7,000 now, or 7,500.
Oh, okay, good.
It's 7,500. So yeah, pretty rocking. Yeah, great donation.
This is Jason, and again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining in. I'd like to thank Russell and John and Chris and all of you guys, and of course everyone who joined in. So it was a wonderful experience tonight. I know the guests that I have with me tonight, my wife, we certainly appreciate your expertise and your knowledge, and thoroughly enjoyed learning more about wine, and certainly having great memories and friendships of those who are here, as well as those that we've connected with virtually. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jason.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody. Russell, thanks a lot, buddy. See you very soon.
Cheers.
Love you, John. Chris,
Love you.
Jason, thank you.
Cheers.
Heidi, I'll see you around the valley, my dear.
Again, if I,
Yeah, that's a job well done.
I'll just leave on just a couple points. I know you're all here because you love wine. If you love wine, when you visit Napa and you're out, the important things when you go to wineries is you need to find out about their vineyard sources, their farming practices, how involved everybody is. That there's so many places in Napa today that it's big places where there's a farming team who doesn't talk to the winemaking team. And it's so important that you have somebody like John who manages the vineyard and then manages the winemaking and makes the wine and blends the wine. And if you have too many chefs, you ruin the broth. And Napa's getting so financially restrictive, and it's getting so over farmed, and there's places that they're growing grapes where they shouldn't grow grapes. And you have to be smart about what you buy if you truly want to have an excellent cellar. And you start to be able to follow farmers and winemakers and the interaction between them, and in the excellence lies in the pieces of dirt, the pieces that the people who farm them and the people that make the wines. And that combination is where excellence in Napa truly lies. And it's not easy to find, but with a little bit of homework and due diligence, you can. And yeah, I love doing this so much. Thank you all for being here today. John, love you.
Thanks. Love you, man. Talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank y'all.